There's something nobody has given you a clean explanation for yet. Not why adult friendships are hard. That part you've probably heard. But why your specific efforts keep producing the same specific result. You show up, you have conversations, you're friendly, you're interested, you follow up sometimes, and the connection plateaus at pleasant, at fine, at acquaintance, and somehow never crosses into something real. And because nobody has explained why that keeps happening, you've probably started filling in the gap yourself with something like, maybe I'm just not good at this anymore. Maybe this is just what adult life is. Maybe this is who I've become. Here's what this video is going to do. It's going to give you the actual explanation, not the surface one. Adults are busy, life gets complicated. You already know that. And it hasn't helped. The one underneath. The structural and psychological one. The one that has nothing to do with who you are or whether you're capable of real connection. Because you are. That part was never actually in question. So let's start somewhere that might feel obvious at first. But stay with it, because there's something underneath it that most people miss completely. Before 30, before the job, the city, the adult life, friendship happened almost automatically for most people. You didn't decide to become close with the people you became close with. You were just near them, over and over again, in the same classroom, the same dorm, the same after-school job, the same lunch table for 3 years running. And it probably felt like you were just good at connecting, like you were the kind of person friendships happen to. But here's what was actually going on beneath the surface. And this is the part that changes how you see everything that came after. Researchers who study friendship formation have identified 3 conditions that, when present together, reliably produce close friendship almost regardless of personality type. The first is proximity, being physically near the same people repeatedly, without having chosen to be. The second is repetition, encountering those people again and again across time without having to arrange it. The third is what researchers call a low-stakes environment, a context where showing a version of yourself that isn't perfectly composed carries no significant social or professional cost. Here's the thing nobody points out directly. You didn't create any of those conditions. School created them for you. Your neighborhood created them. The architecture of early life created them. You were, without knowing it, living inside a friendship machine. A system specifically designed, not intentionally, but effectively, to produce the exact conditions under which human beings reliably and naturally form deep bonds. And then that machine stopped. Now, here's what changed, and why it matters more than most explanations acknowledge. Adulthood didn't just make friendship harder. It systematically removed each of the 3 conditions, one by one, and replaced them with something that looks similar on the surface but functions completely differently. Proximity became optional. You're around people at work, yes, but chosen proximity, the kind where you have to decide to show up, arrange the logistics, clear the calendar, requires a level of activation energy that repeated, unchosen proximity never did. And repetition became conditional. You see your colleagues regularly, but the relationship is framed by role. You're a colleague, a neighbor, a parent at the school pickup. The repetition exists, but it's role-to-role repetition, not person-to-person. The context keeps resetting the relationship to its official category. And the low-stakes environment, that one is almost entirely gone. Think about what adulthood actually looks like socially. Almost every context where you meet new people is, to some degree, a performance context. Work, professional events, neighborhood interactions. Even social gatherings with acquaintances carry a certain weight. A version of yourself you're expected to maintain. The unguarded, slightly awkward, not yet composed version of you that friendships were actually built on at 22. There isn't a natural container for that anymore. And here's what the research on this consistently shows. Without these 3 conditions operating together, the friendship formation process doesn't just slow down, it stalls. Not because the people are wrong, not because you're wrong, because the system that was doing most of the work has been disassembled, and nobody handed you instructions for how to rebuild it manually. Anyone who's been in this knows exactly what I mean. The effort required to manufacture the conditions that once existed automatically is enormous, and it still doesn't quite replicate what they produced naturally. You're not imagining that. The math actually doesn't work the same way, and what nobody tells you is, that's only the first layer of the explanation, which brings us to something deeper and more specific to what you've been experiencing. Because here's where it gets more specific and more useful. Understanding the structural conditions explains why the environment stopped working. It doesn't fully explain why it feels the way it feels. Why it doesn't just feel difficult. It feels almost impossible. Why you can know all of this and still find yourself unable to make the call, staying surface level in conversations you wanted to go deeper in, talking yourself out of the reach out before you've even finished composing it. That part has a different explanation. Here's what happens over the course of adult social life. Gradually, almost invisibly, for most people navigating these conditions, you reach out, it isn't reciprocated, you show up to something and the conversation stays at the surface. You try to go a little deeper with someone and feel, immediately, that the depth wasn't wanted. You invest in a connection and watch it slowly, quietly dissolve without any clear reason. None of these experiences are dramatic, they're small. They accumulate, and your nervous system, which is sophisticated and adaptive and designed to protect you from repeated unnecessary pain, starts to draw a conclusion. Not consciously, you don't decide this. It just starts to happen. The cost-benefit calculation on social risk shifts negative. The part of you that might reach out starts running a quieter calculation first. What's the likelihood this goes nowhere? Is it worth the specific discomfort of trying and not being met? And over time, that calculation starts answering itself before you've even consciously asked it. That's the mechanism underneath the felt impossibility. Not structural conditions alone, the structural conditions trained a response, and that response, which was intelligent and rational and protective, is now operating in situations where it may no longer be necessary. Let that sit for a second. The part of you that can't seem to follow through isn't broken. It isn't evidence of some deep incapacity for connection. It's an extremely well-designed protection system, doing exactly what it learned to do in conditions that genuinely warranted protection. The only problem is that it can't always tell the difference between a situation that warrants protection and a situation that's actually safe. Not broken, just in the wrong conditions. Conditions that can, with the right understanding, actually change. If this is landing, if what's been described here is closer to the truth of your situation than anything you've heard before, there's a resource in the description that goes one step further. It's called the friendship gap. It goes directly into the mechanism that was just described, the internal break, the protection response, and gives you something specific to do with that understanding. Not a list of tips, the actual internal shift. Link in the description. And here's what this understanding actually changes for you moving forward. So here's where this leaves you. Not at a solution, because the solution isn't a single video, but somewhere genuinely different from where you started. You now have a structural explanation. And that matters more than it might feel like right now, because the explanation you were operating with before, the one that placed the problem inside you, in some defect of personality or likability or effort, that explanation had a specific cost. It made every failed social attempt feel like more evidence. Another data point in the case against yourself. This explanation doesn't do that. The structural conditions of adulthood make friendship formation genuinely harder for almost everyone, not selectively harder for the people who have something wrong with them. The internal adaptation that follows from repeated low reciprocation experiences is rational and almost universal. What changes when you hold this explanation instead of the previous one isn't that the difficulty disappears. It's that you stop compounding the difficulty with self-verdict. And that matters, specifically, practically, because self-verdict is one of the things that makes the protection response even more resistant to updating. When you believe the problem is you, every potential social situation becomes a test you might fail. And the nervous system, the one that's already running a cautious cost-benefit calculation, gets even more conservative. When you understand the problem is structural, something different becomes available. You're not proving something about yourself every time you attempt a connection. You're building conditions, slowly, imperfectly, in a genuinely difficult environment. That shift changes what kinds of attempts feel worth making. It changes what it means when something doesn't work. It changes the risk calculation. And here's the one thing worth trying in the next 48 hours. Not as a program, not as a system, just as one small interruption to the pattern. The next time a conversation starts to feel like it's plateauing at the surface, notice the moment before you let it. You don't have to push deeper. You don't have to perform vulnerability. Just notice the moment where you made the choice to stay safe. That's not failure. That's information. That's the mechanism, visible for the first time. And you can only interrupt something you can see. If this opens something you want to go further with, the resource in the description and the pinned comment is built exactly for that next step. It picks up where this video ends. What was the moment you first started wondering if the difficulty was something about you specifically? And what shifted, if anything, when you heard a different explanation? So let me bring this home for you. Here's where we actually are. The explanation most people have been carrying. The one that placed the problem in their character, their likability, their fundamental fitness for connection. That explanation was always incomplete. It was missing the structural layer, the three conditions that produced friendship automatically before, and what their removal actually costs. It was missing the adaptive layer, the way a nervous system learns to protect itself from a specific kind of repeated, low-grade disappointment, and how that protection, which was always rational, can outlast the situations that originally warranted it. Neither of those things is a verdict on who you are. Neither of them is evidence of permanent incapacity. They're descriptions of what happens to most people moving through an environment that was never designed for the kind of connection they're actually looking for. And what nobody tells you is, once you have the right description, you're already doing something different. Not because the description fixes anything on its own. Because you can't interrupt a mechanism you can't name. You have a name now. The version of you that has the friendships you're describing when you let yourself imagine that life, that version isn't someone with a different personality. It's not someone for whom this came easily. It's someone who understood what was actually happening and stopped treating every difficult moment as evidence of something unfixable. That's a different starting point than the one you walked in with. And different starting points lead somewhere else.